Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see so many of you here and so many old friends as well. We have a lot to do over the next hour or so in terms of me speaking at you, so I'm going to speak for about an hour or so, and then hopefully there'll be an opportunity for some question and answers. And where I thought I would take you is here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future that Daniel and I see for the professions, then provide some evidence that we gathered in our preparation for the book, and try and distill this down into a model of what we regard as the evolution of professional service. This, you will see rapidly, is underpinned by technology, and we'll devote a little bit of time to expressing our views on how technology is best understood, which will lead me on to the heart of this conference, artificial intelligence. That'll take me, as one will see from the line of argument, to the question of the future of jobs. And finally, I will close by considering how it is that we share expertise in society. So let's start with the future. In fact, start with two futures. Because the more Daniel and I solved the professions as we explored and investigated, we recognized there were two futures unfolding. And the first, we say, is reassuringly familiar. This is where technology comes along and automates our traditional ways of working. It streamlines and optimizes the professions. So there's not fundamental change here, and broadly speaking, we find professionals comfortable with this idea that the role of technology is to automate pre-existing practices.
All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. On behalf of Codex and Stanford Law School, it's my pleasure to welcome here for this event on the law firm of the future.
So before we start, I was thinking the other day, I was remembering something that happened to me a long time ago. It was about 15 years ago, and I was at a meeting of the American Bar Association, and there was a fellow who was an accountant from one of the big six then accounting firms standing on stage. The topic was multidisciplinary practice. And he said, I got to tell you, lawyers, something. He said, there's been a war going on and you lost. You lost the war. The accounting firms have now taken over your industry. And you know what else? You didn't even know there was a war going on, and it's all over. Well, that guy was a partner at a firm named Arthur Anderson. And there was a lot of hand-wringing after those comments. I remember I was a little alarmed. I was pretty much convinced that the practice of law, as we know it, was over. We came right to the brink as a profession. And then Enron happened, and then WorldCom happened, and MDP, multidisciplinary practice, that threat just kind of went away. Well, I kind of have that same sort of anxiety today. I look around and I see technologies that are just hard to believe. We're going to hear about artificial intelligence here. We're going to hear about competitive pressures from legal outsourced service providers. We're going to hear about different types of management systems. We're going to hear about some of the management systems that are applied to industries and manufacturing being applied to law firms because we have to be that efficient.
I know Katie and Julia are coming from another meeting, so let's go ahead and get started. Dave, what's the latest with the smart building pilot?
I've already done some preliminary analysis on the data. And I'm finding some high temperature outliers. We should discuss it later in the meeting.
Okay, sounds great.
Dave, do you know if we'll have enough of the Yanzi multi-sensors to update the showcase floor?
Actually, I have some concerns about the location of those sensors. We should hold off on doing a one-to-one replacement until I can...
Oh, I'm really sorry to interrupt, Dave. I actually have some ideas about the replacement, so maybe let's connect after the meeting.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll follow up with my team and post an update to the channel after the meeting.
And I'll follow up and send Yanzi an email about those showcase sensors.
Okay, that sounds great.
Managed firms, the way that law firms are being managed is changing. Crowdsourced legal providers, and this is a technology solution. It's very easy for people to go online and find a lawyer or to find a legal solution in a number of different ways. I don't know which of those technologies will win. I'll just tell you there are a lot out there that we're either a part of or we're competing with. Outsourced legal, you'd be surprised how many U.S. lawyers are in Manila, the Philippines right now, doing U.S. work. And for the law students in the group, that's who you're going to be competing with as a first-year lawyer. It's something we really need to be aware of and need to deal with. Non-lawyer management and ownership. The rules of professional conduct Don't allow that in California. They do allow that in other countries. And there is the possibility of publicly traded law firms coming. And talk about a fierce competitor. Wait until we have publicly traded competitors out there. And then finally, what I'll call retail law, and that's just how easy it is. You can go to Sam's Club now and have form a corporation. That's what I do for a living. I form corporations as a lawyer. You can go to Sam's Club and get that. Those are the kind of things that technologies and new legal systems are enabling. So with that, I'm going to save the really big topics for you guys. That's sort of the general environment. And I'd like to turn it over to Vivek first to talk about how technology is going to eat law.
You know, the good news is that Roger gave you the good news. He's sort of 50 years behind the times, according to my estimation.
Okay.
Can I borrow the mouse? I'm going to give you a crash course in technology, in exponential technology, and in artificial intelligence, so you understand how dramatic the changes we're headed into are. First of all, what is exponential growth? We're human beings. We think linearly. If I ask you to tell me how far 30 steps is, all of you can take a pretty good guess. 30 steps is about 30 meters or so. If I ask you to tell me how far 30 exponential steps is, I doubt anyone in this room will have a clue. You're just mere lawyers. 30 exponential steps is 1 billion meters. Do you know what 1 billion meters means in English? 26 times around the planet. How technology is advancing is not linear. Technology is advancing exponentially. This is called Moore's law in the computing field. We've seen the processing power of our computers double roughly every 18 months for the last 100 years almost. It's called a law, even though it literally isn't a law. I mean, I know I'm dealing with lawyers over here, and you'll take issue with that word. It's really a guideline. It's really an observation of how technology has been moving at this rate. Let me put this in simple English. Here's what you get for $1,000. As of 2010, for $1,000, you get the computing power of a mouse brain. At the rate at which Moore's law is progressing, for $1,000, you get the computing power of you, a human being. By 2050, for $1,000, you get the computing power of all of humanity combined. That's what Moore's law means. Now, there are debates, there are disputes, there are violent disagreements in the computing field about whether Moore's law will hold up until 2050 or not. That's the good news. The bad news is that there are no disputes about whether Moore's law will hold up until 2020, 25 or so. In other words, give it 10 years, and the things you have in your pocket are going to have the same computing power as you do. And do you know what the advantage that these devices have? They communicate with each other at gigabit speeds. They share knowledge. They store all the information that they're gathering, and they can be upgraded. We human beings have not had a software upgrade for 100,000 years. So this is how technology is advancing. And I got news for you. It ain't just computing. It's everything that computing touches, including artificial intelligence, robotics, networks, sensors, synthetic biology, genomics, digital medicine, nanotechnology, 3D printing. I can go on and on and on. We are on an exponential curve. Anything that gets touched by computers now is going exponential. And that should scare the crap out of you. I'm going to tell you what the implication of that is. First of all, when you have more than one exponential technology and they converge, 1 + 1 = 11. So it's not enough that you have technology is now advancing exponentially. When computing and telecom and consumer electronics merged, we got smartphones, we got smart TVs, we got games that are lifelike. This is the convergence of multiple technologies. When computing, medicine, and sensors converge, you get breakthroughs in genomics. As of this year, to sequence a full human genome costs about $1,000. 14 years ago, it cost $3 billion to do the same. What happened was that we became software, and the software has become deciphered. At the rate at which genomics is progressing, which is twice at the rate of Moore's law, within 5 years, I will have a smartphone case that does a complete human genome sequence, which means that we can decipher, decode any human being instantaneously, practically. That is what is happening with this computation. You know, the big announcement that Apple made about 3 months ago wasn't that it had a bigger iPhone. What Apple announced was that it became a healthcare company. It announced HealthKit, and it's soon going to announce the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch is a medical device. Apple is getting into the medical devices business, and soon it'll be in the medical business itself. And Apple isn't the only company. Microsoft, Google, Samsung, you name it, they're all competing to now own the field of medicine, a $3 trillion industry. And then you have artificial intelligence. When you combine AI and sensors and computing, guess what you get? You get self-driving cars, you get humanoid robots that can detect human emotions. This is how technology is advancing. Now, look at what happened to video software. What cost $2 million a few years ago now costs about 60 cents. Actually, it's free. Information, knowledge, everything, the cost of everything has dropped precipitously. The NASA's Apollo guidance system, which was launched in 1966, had a 2.048 megahertz chip. You know something? That's equal to what you have in your musical greeting cards. That's what we spent into space. Forget about the Apollo guidance system. The Curiosity rover had a 200 megahertz processor, which is 1/7 of what you have in your smartphones. That's what's in space right now. It has a whopping 2 megapixel camera on it. That's what we're oohing and eyeing about on Mars right now. This is the history of technology. You might be skeptical, but it took, Roger and I were talking earlier about the advance of Robert and I were talking earlier about the advance of technology. He talked about thousands of years. It took thousands of years to go from agriculture to pottery to the plow to mathematics, the Watt engine. But over the last 200 years, we've had major advance after major advance after major advance. This is the curve we're on right now, is exponential. And here's what it means to AI. What AI is machines doing the types of things that humans do. We thought AI was dead. In fact, Roger was commenting on his, 25 years ago you were learning about AI and dreaming about it. We thought AI was dead. AI is not dead. AI is everywhere. AI is in our air traffic control systems. It's in our games. It's in Siri. It's in Google Maps. It's in everything we do now has AI. You recall IBM Watson that defeated the smartest human beings you ever came across? That was AI. And this is what else AI can do. That game over there, Mario Brothers, some researchers in Germany programmed it with AI. Mario is aware that if he steps on Goomba, Goomba dies. And Mario hesitates to step on Goomba. This was done last year in Germany. That is what AI is all about. Those humanoid robots are about 5 years old now. You should see the new versions of these technologies. They haven't even released videos of those technologies because they've advanced so much further. IBM explains it very well. They basically talk about how we've gone from the tabulating systems era to programming systems to now cognitive systems. In other words, computers are learning knowledge right now. They're not rules-based as it used to be. It used to be that when you wrote computer code, you would write computer rules, basically lines of code. Now it's about gathering large amounts of knowledge and disassembling it and reassembling it in different ways. This is the new era of cognitive computing. So the same IBM Watson that defeated human beings at Jeopardy, it went to cancer school. It went to oncology school. It learned everything there is about oncology. This is how it works. Now, this is a very complex chart about how Watson learned oncology. But I want you to put this in perspective of law. Oncology is 1 billion times more complex than law is. How do you decide what's legal or illegal? There's no such thing as laws, literally. In the US, it's case law. You basically look at precedent and you analyze that. How much precedent is there? You could probably have a library that fills this room with all the knowledge that there is about law in the United States of America. Guess what? That's a little microchip in your pocket. It's a flash drive you could have all of that knowledge on. So what do lawyers do? When you have to analyze whether you're going to win a case or not, you go through case history and you try to find precedent for something that was decided by a different court 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, and then you try to prove that your case is valid because this was a decision that was made earlier. How long does it take you to do that? It takes you hours, days, and then also you're human beings. You can only process limited amounts of knowledge. Well, guess what? What if you now programmed Watson with every case that happened and every outcome from every court in America since the beginning of time? You would have a computer that could defeat the brightest lawyers at Jeopardy, which is the equivalent of Jeopardy. That's what you could have within 2 years from now if we started programming Watson up with all of this case history. And that AI-based lawyer would be better by orders of magnitude than any human-based lawyer that exists today. And guess what happened with Watson? It took about 5 years to get there, but Watson is now more precise, more accurate than human beings are. Human beings have an accuracy rate in oncology analysis of 75 to 84%. Guess what? Watson is at 95% already. At the rate at which it's progressing, once we start getting more medical history with the cost of genomics dropping the way it has, and now with electronic medical records being a law in the United States, and with all of the data that we're going to be gathering from our smartphones, the Apple Watch, the Samsung Watch, the Google Watch, the Microsoft Watch, everything around us is going to be gathered and uploaded. That 95% accuracy will be 99.999999% within 5 years from now. Then what happens? What human being can compete with Watson in oncology? What happens when you have the equivalent AI-based Watson? Are you going to be able to stand up to Watson? I don't think so. Watson is not only learning English, it's also learning Japanese right now. So Watson has an advantage of not being bound by our culture, our norms, our language. It's a global phenomenon. It'll soon learn every language there is and be able to communicate and understand laws of all over the world. So if you want advice on whether you have a case which is valid in China or Japan or India or Afghanistan, ask Watson and it will advise you. Watson has many more uses than medicine. It's stock trading, legal document discovery, as I said, security, intelligence, law enforcement, new food recipes. Watson actually studied everything about human food, and it's created many new recipes which expert chefs think are exceptional. It's also composing music. And AI is running Hong Kong subways right now. AI is everywhere, and it's coming. It's going to take your jobs away.
All right.
I'm going to kill myself right now.
Well, we'll be getting to the contrary view before the end of this.
But in our travels, and I know everyone in this room has sympathy with this, we also saw a second future that we believe is unfolding in parallel. And this is a future where many of the problems to which historically only professionals could provide the answers, many of these problems are now being solved in entirely new ways, innovative ways through technology. So technology is coming along in this second role, not simply to automate what has gone on for years, but to innovate, to give rise to new ways, essentially, of delivering professional service. And what we say is that these two futures will run along in parallel for a while, but in the long run, we believe the second will dominate. And in due course, the traditional professions as we know them will come to be dismantled. Now, this is not a prediction over the next few years, this is over the next few decades. And it might sound horrific, and many professionals say, what a gloomy message you have. But I want to say at the outset that our interest has always been in the recipients of service. While we have sympathy with those who need to adapt, those who currently provide, our overwhelming interest is in patients, in clients, in students, those who receive service. And it seems to us that this second future provides an opportunity to make the expertise of professionals far more widely available than was possible, indeed was conceivable in the past. We also thought, though, we should take a step back and ask a more fundamental question. Why do we have the professions at all? And we spent the first chapter of our book looking at this. What basic problem do our professions exist to solve? And the more we thought about it, we recognize, and to some extent we take this from Herbert Hart, the great legal philosopher, in his book The Concept of Law, who talks about truisms about human nature. And one of them, he says, is that human beings have limited understanding. It's unarguable. We all have limited understanding. And so when we're faced with problems in our world beyond our knowledge and experience, serious problems, we tend in the print-based industrial society to turn to these people called professionals. When we have a problem with our health, in relation to law, in relation to our buildings and so forth, our tax affairs, we turn to these people we call professionals. And they have what we in the book define as practical expertise. And that's a mix of knowledge and expertise and experience, but also know-how and skills. The whole cluster of attributes that we find in professionals. We call this practical expertise. And the only way in the print-based industrial society that we as non-experts can gain access to this practical expertise is through these professionals. And they're operating under this grand bargain. And this is essentially the monopoly, the exclusivity that we grant professionals in many areas, and certainly in law, as people who are the only ones who are allowed to conduct particular tasks, whether it be appearing in a courtroom or conducting an operation. So these professionals, we argue, are gatekeepers. They're the custodians, the curators of knowledge and expertise that they dispense, they make available to people who need this. And this is the solution of the print-based industrial society. But we're no longer in a print-based industrial society. We're in a technology-based internet society. And if we're really honest, around the world, our professions are creaking. Our health service, our legal services, our educational services. Even in advanced economies, there are concerns, complaints, worries. We face a crisis, it seems to us, in how it is that our professions deliver their services. For most people, for the most part, professional service is unaffordable. We know this in law in particular. Many of the practices are antiquated. They're opaque. Sometimes this is intentional obfuscation, but sometimes it's the jargon, the lingo we all use to communicate with one another is impenetrable for the non-expert. And also the professions underperform in a very specific way. We're not saying the professions do their job badly, but what we are saying is that the expertise of the very best can, because of the way they make this expertise available, only be made available to a very few. And so our professions are unaffordable, antiquated, opaque, and underperforming. We think this is a fairly severe indictment. So the question we ask in the book is this: can we solve the problem differently? Can we find a new way of offering access to this practical expertise that doesn't involve human beings acting as gatekeepers?
Roger's going to tell us how clueless I am, right? Robert, I mean, why do I keep getting your name wrong? Robert, sorry.
Okay, so Natalie, would you like to tell us a little bit about CaseSmart?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll say is I support some of your views, maybe not all of them, but I did.
They're not views. I'm just stating the fact. It would be scary if it was. I mean, if it was my views, it would be a great situation. I'd sleep at night.
I did read a study that it's expected, that by the year 2025, half of the jobs as we know them today in the U.S. will be replaced through automation and cognitive computing skills, AI.